predicted we would be 20 seconds early today. I've gone 20 seconds early today because we're on a tight schedule with Styx. We have a time zone difference to navigate, and I want to give everyone as much opportunity to get in quickly so that we can jump right into the thick of the discussion, because it's going to be amazing. So first of all, everybody, welcome to the stream today. A noontime stream because Styxhexenhammer666, aka, and I should say initially known as Tarl Warwick, which when I found out that that was his given name, I was like, that is the name of a superhero. Quite literally, Tarl Warwick. When I didn't even realize what it was when I saw it in the support links of his, some links on his channel. I thought it was the name of a movie. So good name, darn it, if I dare say so myself. And we're going to get into this quickly today because I got questions for Styx, and we might have to do this again later if we don't get to all of them. Now, I'm going to do my best with the super chat. Standard disclaimers as always. Is that your razor? Did you see this? It's a nail clipper. I don't even know if I brought that in. Oh, okay, that might be an inside joke. And we got BlackRock Beacon. I've noticed a lot more networking and collaboration between the big independents recently. It's a good trend. Some should host a gathering. Get Viva, Styx, Timcast, Rogan, Weinstein Boys, Bros, Friedman, Rukowski, Peterson, Sargon, Rubin, etc. We need the borders to open up before we can do that. And yeah, now let's see. Okay, I see Styx in the background. I said we would go live I said I'd bring him in within 2 minutes so that we can really just jump into the discussion here. The clanks are coming, and let's do it. 2 minutes. Everyone who is going to tune in late because YouTube notifications are notoriously slow, especially given subject matter and sometimes guest, will catch up and watch it afterwards. Styx, I'm coming to bring you in. Let's do this. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing well.
Okay, so like I said, when we saw each other briefly in the backstage before going live, this is somewhat surreal in a very weird sense because I've been watching you for a long time. I don't know if it's been since 2016, but it's been a long time. And I get some information from you, and I like your delivery on the political stuff. And on some of the other stuff, I have less interest in the occult and religion, but it's still interesting nonetheless. Styx, elevator pitch for anybody who may not know who you are, but based on the clanks in the crowd, everybody knows who you are. Who are you in an elevator pitch? And then I want to get into some childhood stuff.
You should follow my material because I'm really, really cool. And you know that I'm cool because I constantly get abused by big tech, and they're run by boring old billionaires.
So now
it's about as good as I can do.
It's good enough. It's good enough. Now, first of all, you're 33 years old?
Yes.
And you're born in Vermont?
Technically speaking, I was born in New Hampshire, actually. Same area as G.G. Allen, but I've lived in Vermont most of my life, yeah.
All right. And how many are you? Many siblings? Are you an only child? What did your parents do for a living? What was your childhood like?
I have one sibling. My childhood, basically, I was raised poor, like close to Appalachian poverty poor. And that's a backside of Vermont that most people that come as tourists don't understand, is that there are a lot of Vermonters, hundreds of thousands of them, that actually are basically 1 or 2 missed paychecks away from the streets. And they think that it's Bernie Sanders ice cream land, but that's because they spend all their time on Church Street in Burlington or in Montpelier, or they go to an art gallery and a cheese festival or something. They think that's genuine Vermont for the average Vermonter.
And which part of Vermont are you from, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, no, I grew up initially in a little village. It's not even a town, called Woodstock, not from the festival's fame. It's a different Woodstock. It is really nice, but it's extremely tiny, very close-knit, very, very rich, high amount of wealth and equality. And I spent my young adulthood in Rutland, which is where I consider basically my long-term residence.
All right. And your parents, if I may ask, what do they do for a living, or what do they do?
Yeah, my dad was a chef for a great many years. He's retired now, and my mom works at McDonald's.
Okay, it's very
and never eats the food there. By the way, for anyone, disclaimer for health purposes.
I am told that once you work at a McDonald's, you can never again eat at a McDonald's. I once worked at a coffee shop, and I had trouble drinking coffee for the longest time afterwards, not because of hygiene or anything, just because you get nauseated by the smell. And I worked at a smoked meat packing factory. Couldn't eat smoked meat for years afterwards.
So, imagine working at the butcher shop.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I kill animals all day, but I became a vegan.
Now, so let's say, what did you study growing up, university-wise? How did you end up where you are, having taken the path through the occult and religion?
Oh, that's a longer story than an hour would allow. Long story short, I overdosed actually when I was in college and ended up dropping out of UVM. I got into a good school and everything, and I was pursuing initially plant biology, but then I realized it was mostly chemistry, and I'm like, well, I can't do that. I don't really like chemistry. I want to grow things and go out into the jungle or something. I want to look at plants in nature, document them, stuff like that. I switched to anthropology and I was doing really well, but then I overdosed, realized that my life goals were not in keeping with the reality, and basically kind of became just a broke hippie for a little while. And then I magically became a YouTuber.
When you say you overdose, I was reading up on you and I got your website on Fandom. Do you mean like marijuana, some synthetic form of marijuana? Is that the incident you're talking about?
It's way more power. No, people need to understand spice is not synthetic marijuana. In fact, it's partially an opioid agonist. You should never use it. It's definitely not safe. I used a research chemical called JWHO18, and it completely fried me out, probably killed part of my brain off, actually. But it showed me that the things that I was doing, including UVM, weren't actually long-term feasible goals for me. I just wouldn't have been happy in them. And I sort of dropped out almost of society. For a while, I had anhedonia and, couldn't even smile, basically. But then I was able to restructure my life. Everything that I have now, ironically enough, is due to me almost dying from drug use. So I keep that in mind, definitely, as I live my life.
Clank, clank. No, I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's like James O'Keefe said, that you talk about even the bad experiences and can you qualify it as regret if it's put you in a position to be where you are now. And so he has an interesting philosophical view of regret. But I mean, are there any, I've had some experiences and acquaintances that have had similar issues and ended up requiring treatment for months in hospitals. Have you had lingering, lasting impact from this, or at some point in time you just realized the episode itself was over?
No, not for many, many years. I don't have any symptoms of it now. If anything, the irony is it's made me a happier person because it cleared out the dross out of my life. Jolly, like racking up a bunch of debt trying to study for some useless piece of paper to work in a lab somewhere. I never probably would have been able to do that. I'm just too, I don't really like being around other people with regards to work. I prefer to do everything myself. So technically it helped me, I guess, long term.
It's interesting. I think it was Naval on Twitter, or Naval, I think it's Naval or Naval, said that, once you experience independent work, you make yourself unemployable effectively, because you can never contemplate going back to whatever, a 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 if you're a lawyer.
Well, also if you just express your own opinions, because these days if you do that, it makes you unemployable mostly.
That is an interesting, I mean, we're getting into it now, and that's an interesting thing, that when people can be canceled, it makes people self-censor because they don't want to say anything that would result in them losing their employment. I know your YouTube channel went through religious stuff. It went through some of the occult stuff, which you go back to from time to time, but now it's pretty much focused on political commentary, political
no. That's I still do just as much occult material as before. It's just instead of the occult generals, I spend more time most days reading and editing occult literature than I actually do doing anything video related, whether it's creating videos, planning videos, whatever. Books, because I'm interested in that also. I'm a bibliophile. I like books physically. I like history. I like anthropology. I still do, even though I quit it at UVM when I dropped out. And so what I do is I delve into literally everything, folklore and fortune telling, the history of the witch trials, all of these wonderful things. And what I've tried to do for about 6 years, I think it is now, is I looked at Amazon and I realized that a lot of the editions, there were literally nothing more than primitive scans of PDF files that were freely available. And they really weren't doing anyone any good. And so what I said is, if I can take these and I can edit them myself and make them better, maybe number one, I can make money, and number two, these texts won't be forgotten because, you know, we've got this opportunity to back up everything now that we've got the internet around, but nobody was doing it. And so I launched off basically into that goal, and I've been doing that ever since. I think I've got like 330 different editions or something now.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, I mean, that's amazing. So when did YouTube either become a main time thing, or YouTube and video creation? When did that become a thing for you?
Well, I mean, it always had been kind of, but when I first got there, and it was in 2007, so it was a long time ago. I'm showing my age. It was just, you know, I was joking around. Really around 2012 or thereabouts, I started making more videos, especially religious ones. And before that, I had done, under a different moniker, I had made a lot of videos about entheogens, which is drug use specifically, the use of psychedelics. But it really wasn't until Sargon of Akkad did his due diligence video after the 2016 election. He shouted me out. I gained almost 10,000 subscribers in a 48-hour period. That really was my breakthrough with regards to the political analysis that I do now, and do several videos every day on YouTube.
Because it's interesting that I found it interesting that you go from religion to politics, and in my mind, there's the only thing that distinguishes religion from politics is the subject matter. Everything else seems to be similar in a behavioral, ideological perspective.
Yeah, they're both faith-based, so.
So now the internet is saying that you're one of the earliest ones to have predicted Donald Trump winning, that you were one of the first ones to vote for him in the primary in Vermont. First of all, I mean, what was your political background, political upbringing, political evolution leading up to 2016?
Yeah, the evolution is this. Initially, when I was younger, of course, I didn't really have any strong political views when I was a kid. By the time I was in high school, I was marginally right-leaning for a while, but only in the sense that I believed I was a Christian at the time, and so that affected my politics. I very quickly soured on the Bush administration because of Iraq and things like that. You know, the FEMA disaster with Katrina. And at the time, I thought it had made me a liberal because I was like, well, Obama's saying the right things, so I'm going to vote for him. That makes me a liberal, right? Because, of course, when you're at that age, you know, you don't really know. So I voted for Obama, realized he wasn't doing anything right. Then I voted for Ron Paul and became a libertarian, and I remain one. The thing is that in the absence of a libertarian party that actually makes sense and has a strategic goal in mind, because people like Gary Johnson, Joe Jorgensen, clearly they don't know what they're doing. They're just grifters. The LP itself, its platform has become all messed up. I voted for Trump, and I don't regret it at all. I voted for Trump again in this last election, and if he runs again, I'll vote for him again because he actually got results. And I'm a pragmatist. I believe it's more important to get the reform that you can get than to talk about the reforms that you can't.
All right, and now Barnes is in the house, so I'm going to bring him in while we have that pause. Robert, how you doing?
Good.
Robert and I and Nate and Logic. Oh, geez, good Logic. We were having a late night debate last night about Giuliani's suspension, so it's carrying on into today. Let's see. Robert, bring you in.
I was going to ask, what do you think about Dave Smith as and Michael Malice sort of entering into the libertarian arena?
Yeah, I've heard of them. I haven't looked further into their specific platforms, but I'd definitely be willing to entertain them. I'd have to know. What I would like is for all of the potential libertarian candidates to give like a rundown on some of the basic issues, because sometimes it seems like it's a little bit all over the place. I think that's partially by design, by the way.
Yeah. Did you watch the Libertarian Party convention in 2016 with the guy that did a live strip job?
Yes. I think here's the thing. Here's my unique perspective. I love that the Libertarian Party can sort of self-satirize and that sort of thing can happen, but at the same time, it holds it back. Like the average person looking at that, they're like, it's meme worthy and not in a good way. And but I can appreciate it. At least it's funny.
But how do you reconcile this? Like most people are going to say, if you're going to vote libertarian, I mean, I presume you're taking a vote away from the Republicans. It doesn't go the other way around. Or, so I mean, and then people are going to say you're supporting the party, which is a lot of people say it's meme worthy. I know nothing of libertarianism or libertarians or the memes or the jokes. I just know what people say. And so what's the purpose in a way of supporting a libertarian when it cannot really help change the political system?
Well, why are people voting for the Republican candidate? You're taking a vote away from the Libertarians. See, I mean, it goes both ways. That's dragged out by every mainline political party in the world during elections that are anywhere near close. It's bullcrap, basically.
Now, you now live in Europe, right?
I'm currently in Amsterdam, yeah.
Now, what do you think of, have you seen their elections? Because there you have, most of Europe, you have multi-parties, so that small parties can have a bigger voice. Well, what do you think about that?
Well, potentially, but I made a video on this actually a few weeks ago. I've come to understand that really a multi-party system is the same as a two-party system. The only difference is that instead of having ideological groups within one of two parties, you have those ideological groups each represented by a party, but they still conglomerate into a de facto party for rulership purposes, because you need a coalition. You have to have a prime minister or whatever in your country happens. By having 51% of the actual people doing things. There's really no difference. I would say that in some ways the Dutch are less liberal, less socialistic than the United States. In some ways, there's definitely like the idea of cancel culture. I mean, it doesn't really exist. You see political stickers like literally everywhere. Nobody cares. Nobody's trying to get people fired from their jobs. It's actually, in that sense, I know that it's anti-gun. I know that there's higher taxes. I know that there's a lot of regulation. And as far as business regulation, the Netherlands are more capitalistic and right-wing than the United States.
It's a tax haven for many U.S. corporations.
The business tax rate, yeah.
Yeah, because they do the double Dutch and whatnot.
The way Styx, you're describing Amsterdam, it makes Canada sound like the worst of both worlds in that we have high taxation, high socialism tendencies, coupled with cancel culture, coupled with what we effectively see as the CRT in the United States, coupled with the same political system that you're describing. We have a bunch of parties: New Democratic Party, Liberals, Conservatives, PPC, Green Party, and yet, you get to the federal government, and all that you have is them forming one coalition. Yeah, you have the Bloc Québécois, effectively making a coalition with NDP, Liberals, and the Green Party, and the Conservatives on the other side, who seem more liberal than some liberals. And so, it's a 5-party, 6-party system that splits up the votes, but it ends up being two effective ideologies battling it out.
I saw a meme the other day of Boris Johnson standing inside of the door there to one of the Downing Street or whatever it's called, and they've got like the pride drapery on either side. And it's like, oh, when did you become Labour? And I say this, I mean, I support gay rights and stuff in full disclosure, and I don't have any problem saying that. But I do find it funny that someone's representing a supposedly like kind of a stuffy moralistic movement, or at least that's the stereotype of it. And yet sitting there like, yeah, gay rights, you can marry who you want in this country.
Well, the other thing that's fascinating to me about the whole sort of virtue signaling of who can be more socially left on policies that have no consequence to the war machine or to big corporate America or global corporations in general. They see it as easy money. But the one big hindrance on a lot of this is something they usually just don't want to talk about, but which has come up as an issue in Europe and the Netherlands, that they had one version of cancel culture that existed. It was people getting shot and killed for their beliefs, and people getting blown up in other parts of Europe. But I mean, like most of Islamic culture is still very anti-gay. And yet you see these like gay rights movements marching for Hamas. And it's like, I guess you don't know what Hamas does on the weekends with people that are gay in Palestine. And,
do you think that Elon Omar will be pushing for the pride flag to be hanging outside the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia anytime soon?
Exactly.
She should go there and put it up herself, and a women's rights banner as well. Yes. Until she does that, she won't have my respect.
Well, especially, here you have someone who's an escapee from Somalia, though where she was exactly and what was really happening and what she was really escaping from is still a very interesting open question.
From her other brother, man.
Yeah, exactly. There's that, and then there may be family connection to some more problematic actors in Somalia as to why and how she got out of there. But that's another story for another day. But to what degree in Europe is there recognition of this sort of cognitive dissonance of there's starting to be pushback in Northern Europe and the rest against this sort of influx of Islamic immigration. And in particular, it was often the second generation of people who'd come there for labor who were radicalized and committed violent acts. Where is the current progress or current status of things there?
It's hard for me to get a read of that because basically I've been in Amsterdam, so I can only talk from the perspective of one country, one particular cosmopolitan, metropolitan area. I would say that the idea of political correctness is absent by and large here. It is not. I realize a lot of people make jokes like on 4chan, like Europistan or something. You're not allowed to say what you want. That, at least insofar as the Netherlands goes, is mostly absent. I think that's really more of a thing for Germany and the UK more than anywhere else. Because you saw Hungary there, and they just what was it? They banned they banned even educating people about homosexuality existing. And Western Europe condemned them, other than Portugal, because of the neutrality situation with their president. All of Eastern Europe stood with them. And it's almost like a tale of two worlds. And I've never been in Eastern Europe, although I'd like to travel there. I imagine it literally would be like a different world because you are behind the Iron Curtain. And you know what it's like when you're told what you can and cannot say, what you can and cannot believe as well.
I say we're experiencing that right now in Canada in terms of certain legislation that's being passed, certain basically certain legislation and certain governance of online discourse. It is interesting that when you think of it in Europe, and I've seen the same jokes, Styx, because we're probably all visiting the same website. They refer to Europe as one big thing, but by and large, I see it as Germany and the UK, Scotland, Ireland as being more along the same lines as Canada. But then France, and I lived in France. It was 20 years ago, but they were much more open about certain things to the point where people in North America made fun of them for being too open about sex, too open about these other issues. So, yeah, I mean, you're there now. No issues of freedom of speech, no issues of cancellation. What are the problems and what are the benefits of living in Amsterdam versus what you see in the States?
Well, there are several problems living in the Netherlands. Number one is that it is high tax and high cost. Not in a draconian sense, but it's elevated compared to what the average American certainly would be used to. There are no guns. Like, I don't even think you can get a standard BB gun, like, the kind you can get in Walmart, as long as you flash your ID. I don't even think you can get those here. And there's a lot of trash because the Dutch are litter bugs for some reason, which is funny because there's a lot of environmental, like eco and organic food and stuff like that. As far as benefits, it's safe. I mean, this is a big city. It's the size of Boston, and yet the crime rate here is relatively low. It's very outgoing. It's definitely expat friendly. And as far as free speech and free expression goes, I think, I think some of the Dutch, probably at least Wilders fans, would appreciate it more than the liberals in the United States. So there's that.
When I was there, there seemed to be, and from watching it, sort of a political gap between the politics of Amsterdam and some of the countryside.
Yes.
Is that still the case?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Especially with Friesland, because there's still a secessionary movement there.
Wow.
You'll almost, by the way, never see a Dutch flag in the Netherlands. And I find that funny. You're much more likely to see a flag. If you see a flag flown, it's probably for a business or it's for a region. Like in Amsterdam, you're more likely to see a flag with 3 X's on it, which is the sort of the symbol of Amsterdam, than you are to see a Dutch flag. I find that hilarious because in the United States, every third or fourth house, even in the most liberal state, has a U.S. flag.
Styx, this will date me. I don't know if the hostel is still open, but is there a hostel in Amsterdam called the Flying Pig? It's apparently in the red light district. I stayed there.
I've literally never been anywhere near the red light district, nor want to, because I'm just not into the party scene or anything like that.
So this is the limit of my experience. I was 20 years old living in Paris, and I said, I'm going to do a weekend in Amsterdam and see what Amsterdam was known for at the time. I stayed in this hostel. I think it was called the Flying Pig. Someone can correct me in the chat. In the red light district. I got mugged at 2:30 in the morning. The hostel, I could hear the rats crawling around the ceiling. I wasn't into the things that people in Amsterdam were into at the time. And so I left after 24 hours.
You mean you didn't smoke a little ganj?
Not at that point in my life. I was well past any desire to alter my mental faculties. So I didn't have a good time there. Don't have a good memory of it, but I'm told it's a beautiful place.
It's great, but I mean, the red light district is problematic because a lot of it is tourists, and so like the dross from other nations will show up to get plastered and then puke everywhere. Is basically the reputation.
Yeah, and I was wondering, like, they were talking about changing some of the pot dens, some of the pot stores, because of people not knowing what to, people falling off of bridges and drowning because they took the wrong thing.
Good riddance.
Has any of that changed, and how much is it still prevalent?
No, they've talked about that, but I don't think anything meaningful has actually been done. I just think the looked alarm actually is the funniest thing. On the first, is it Friday or Monday of every month that they do the alarm?
It doesn't matter. It's the first.
The first. At the beginning of every month, they have the bomb raid sirens go off. And the first time it went off, I'm thinking to myself after Liz explained it to me, I'm like, imagine being a tourist on magic mushrooms or huge dose of pot or something, and the bomb raid sirens start going off, and you jump into the canal or something. It would be so funny.
Why do they do that?
I'm assuming it's because most of the country is under water if the dikes break, and so if anything happens to them, you want to tell people you better get to the second floor.
Now, Styx, someone posted a comment a few minutes ago. I really liked the No Cotton Skyscrapers video that dispels the progressive's false historical narrative. Would Styx be willing to make more of these? Oh, sorry, that wasn't the one. One of the one was, please ask Styx why he favors censorship, RWW. Now, I don't know what that is, but I know that you don't favor censorship, so I imagine it's a sarcastic comment. But
yeah,
explain. You've never monetized your YouTube channel, and I think this has something to do interplay with censorship on big tech in general. But do explain.
Yeah, well, I know what they're referring to. Their comment doesn't have anything to do with monetization. It has to do with Right Wing Watch, which is a defamatory, slanderous tabloid rag that's partially funded by George Soros' People for the American Way, which has harassed me and many other YouTubers and all tech as well numerous times. Got briefly banned a few days ago off of YouTube because they keep stealing people's video content. And years ago, they had their auxiliary channel taken down for the same thing. They ended up removing all of the YouTubers' content off of it. And at the time, I joked about it, and I was like, oh, well, basically, they deserve it. And some leftists have said, well, here's Styx. He supposedly supports free speech, but he supports these people being censored. And I had to point out, number one, what they're doing has nothing to do with speech, because they're just replicating other people's material. Number two, it's a group. It's not an individual. They're just a bunch of morons. They've literally harassed me multiple times. Jared Holt used to work with them before he decided to throw them under the bus very wisely. He was basically the big goon of Right Wing Watch for several years, and all he did basically was defame people.
Yeah, I was unaware that he was now gone, because I've dealt with him for multiple clients. Dealt with him. He's come after me too. So
literally, do you want to know who he works for and how funny it is?
No, go ahead.
The Atlantic Council.
Yes, of course. People don't know that's just an organization that wants to promote war, that works with CrowdStrike, works with all those kind of organizations.
Exactly. He sold out to tack another zero onto his income, basically.
That
I find that I actually support him in that. More power to him for screwing the leftoids in the back.
Okay, so interesting. I was sort of more aware of the Right Wing Watch. I forget who I think it was Jimmy Dore that just did a video on it. So I think I'd seen a bit of it. And people don't appreciate that there's a difference between free speech and, on the one hand, copyright infringement, and on the other hand, doxing and targeted harassment, which are things that right or left, YouTube as a platform should not and cannot condone under the pretext of freedom of speech. But that's as familiar as I am with Right Wing Watch.
They were serial doxers as well.
All right. Now, segued into that question, which was actually not related at all. You've never monetized your channel on YouTube.
Nope.
First of all, have you ever seen an ad on it despite not being monetized under the new terms? And explain why you made that decision and how it's impacted your channel.
Okay, the first part, no, I haven't. But that's because I use both AdBlock Plus and NoScript, and I never use a smartphone for browsing the internet unless I'm in a waiting room. I'm on a laptop. I hate smartphones. Long ago, I realized that's not my generation of tech. I'm from the cool generation where computers were stronger, like laptops. As far as why, it's just years ago, literally more than a decade, I think now, I just pledged not to do that because I realized that was not the future of independent content creation if you wanted to have an income. It made more sense to crowdfund, to sell merch, or to do something on the side like I do with my Amazon releases and just link things out. Literally forcing people to sit there for potentially like upwards of 10, 15 seconds just to click on your video. The amount of audience retention as far as the use of time, which is really what we compete for, because you can subscribe to 5 channels, but you can only be watching and paying attention to one thing at a time. If you're looking at the actual use of time, people, I thought, would prefer things that didn't have ads on them. And for years and years, I think that was proven true. It isn't only until recently that YouTube began screwing non-priority creators just through its algorithms that changed. And that's not because ads are good. They're still potentially deleterious. It's just because we're competing with a handful of people that YouTube has handpicked.
But now let me ask you another question, because you're going to have a crowd. The principle not to advertise on YouTube is one. I use ads on YouTube. I like the passive sort of. A pressure comes with relying on community support, in that you sort of, at some point, community support can think that they are entitled to not dictate or control, or at least suggest content. So you become beholden to them to some extent. There's always an interplay there. But for the people who like the fact that you don't monetize, do you not get dumped on for using Amazon, the big evil corporation, to make money?
No, and I would also say at the same time, there have been a handful of instances where people have tried to convince me to make certain content and tried to say, well, I'm donating. I just ignore them and tell them not to donate, in all honesty. As far as Amazon goes, I don't see the publishing on demand side of Amazon as evil, or even the eBay ripoff style part of Amazon. I think that Bezos, his particular political views are wrong. I think that WAPO is terrible. But as far as Amazon enabling people like me to actually publish releases, if anything, it's promulgating free speech, at least through that methodology, more than almost any of the other big tech sites at this point. And they really haven't, by the way, and to their credit, they have not done a huge amount of censorship there. I know like Roosh had some stuff removed, whatever, who cares, and a few other people, but by and large, even the really edgy political content, unless it really goes out of its way, is still there.
Now, why did you get into this space in the first place? What was your idea about being a content creator?
In general, like on YouTube or Amazon?
Yeah, just in general, as a lifestyle, as a means of employment, as an idea.
It basically, initially, I was only making videos due to boredom. And as far as the Amazon releases, as far as my editing, it was just the recognition that there was a niche to be filled that I personally benefited from, because I was trying to look up like occult works. And I realized that most of them, they were either really expensive, and of course I was poor at the time, or they were crappy. They were essentially just physical prints of things that I could get for free online. And I said, well, let me close the gap, and I'll hold the price down so that people that are lower income like me are capable of buying these books. And now hundreds and hundreds of editions later, it's like what? I think 120,000 paperback sales or something like that.
Styx, actually, I meant to ask you right off the beginning, but I think I know the answer. Someone says I'm late. Someone 63 round. I'm late. Has he explained his name? So I get the 666 part, given your subject matter. The Styxhexenhammer, for anybody who doesn't know, what is the origin of your name?
Yes, the origin of the name, initially Styxhexenhammer, without, by the way, the 666, is this. Styx is the marsh of hell for the wrathful people. It's basically just where angry and warlike people go to, kill each other forever and whatever. And Hexenhammer is the German term for the Malleus Maleficarum, which was a book of persecution. It was the primary text that was used to tell who was or was not a witch during the burning times. And I sort of invert the meaning of that to be like, instead of the hammer of the witches, like hammering the witches, it is the hammer that is wielded by witchcraft. And so that's sort of how I see myself. It's a retribution upon persecution. That's basically my entire existence.
And how many people have told you to change your name because it's too hard to pronounce, or it's too long, or you're going to have trouble succeeding on YouTube?
Mostly the latter, and thousands of people have told me to do that, and I never will. Like on some of the newer sites that I'm on, like on Substack, I'm just Tarl. And the reason for that is just it wasn't taken, it's shorter, and it just sort of made sense. But on YouTube, I'll always be Styxhexenhammer666. And if people, my thing has been, if somebody looks at that username and says, well, he's got the mark of the beast in there, I can't watch his videos, then they're not going to get anything out of it because they're superstitious.
Now, you mentioned YouTube. Now, you're also on all the other platforms. How did you go about adding those, promoting those, and how successful has that been for you?
Massively successful. Basically, you just make an account, preferably with a similar username. And what I've done that I don't think any other major creator has done is that regularly, literally every single day, I tell people about the fact that I'm on those platforms. Because otherwise, if you don't repeatedly say that, let's say that somebody watches your videos, but they only watch a couple of videos a week, and you only mention once in that week that you're on Odyssey or on Rumble, they might not know. I see very talented creators, some which have audiences considerably larger than mine. They have a Rumble account, they have a BitChute account, they're on Odyssey, Minds, and all these other things. They tell people once, right at the outset when they make the new account, and then they never do anything again. I was doing BitChute exclusives for almost a year there before I started doing new tech exclusives. And now I've got, I think, 140,000+ subscribers on BitChute and almost 50,000 on Odyssey.
That reminds me, if you want a good alternative site to go to, you can always go to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Have you thought about opening up a locals page, Styx?
I have heard of it actually several times, but I'm not actually sure what it's about. But yeah, if it's a good site, yeah, of course.
I'll send you a link afterwards. It's been very, I mean, Robert and I are I'd say doing, it's amazing what we've managed to build there. My concern has always been diluting the sources to which you refer people, because everyone was like BitChute, Subscribestar, Rumble, Odyssey, Library. I can't think of all the other ones. And at some point, you cause more confusion. When I used to sell shoes, one of the things we were taught was don't offer more than 3 pairs because you're going to confuse them out of a sale. So Rumble, Locals, and YouTube seems to be working for us, and the other ones just seem to dilute. But that's why I actually practice that too. I cast the net a bit wider, but I was using a site called Brighteon for a while, and I had to let that go because I started using several other sites. So yeah, I mean, if I was on Locals, I'd have to take a look at the other sites that I'm on and prioritize the effort. Now, Styx, I love this question. Some people have a quicker answer than others. You've been on YouTube for 10 years. You live near an airport, eh?
Yeah, well, everything in Amsterdam is near an airport. I do apologize for that. It's literally unavoidable. There's nothing I can do.
Fantastic. it adds charm. You've been on social media for a decade plus, putting out content virtually daily, if not multiple times daily. What has been the one piece of content you put out that's gotten you in the most trouble in terms of backlash? And what's the thing that you regret the most of content that you've actually put out there?
Well, I mean, I had videos of myself high back in the day, but I don't think that anyone has those at this point. As far as trouble, I think the only video, I actually have kept my nose clean for the most part. The only video that got taken down was, God, it would have been last year. It was the one where I defended Trump when people were claiming that he told people to inject bleach. YouTube took that down because I pointed out, hey, if you are not specifically talking about disinfectant in the sense of cleaning your floor, there are drugs you can inject that are antimicrobial, and that appears to be what he's suggesting. And YouTube had a big problem about that. I couldn't understand it at the time.
So when did you first start seeing the censorship in your own experience?
Technically back as early as 2013 or thereabouts. I had a video called The Dark Ages of the Internet that I made way back then, but it really came to bear after the 2016 election. And really came to bear after this latest farce of an election, actually, honk honk. I won't say any more for stream purposes, because literally 2 days afterwards, almost every major content creator started cratering as far as their channel growth. And why this is because the priority creators, especially related to news and sociopolitics, started being recommended even more than before, and YouTube rolled out Up Next. And the Up Next got changed over time, and now basically, if I look up even my own videos, half of the videos that could possibly come up next are like Fox or MSNBC.
It's amazing. I noticed the exact same trend on everything on my channel. It's always Fox next, which I don't know what that means. It's Fox or CNN or one of the mainstream media outlets, and It's very rarely more of my content unless, we put it in the end cards. So you notice the censorship back in 2013 comes to a head in 2016. You have stayed out of trouble just in terms of, not having to worry about the monetizing aspect, or have you had any meaningful issues with YouTube other than the video taken down?
Well, yeah, because my channel has almost stalled out at this point because of their algorithmic censorship. Really, in my case, it's not so much worrying about being kicked off the platform. It's just no longer being able to compete on even playing field with many other users, and all of which are either corporate or astroturfed. And that's across the board. People shouldn't think that this is a political thing, by the way. It's not because Styxhexenhammer, the evil right-winger. It wouldn't matter if I was far left. I've seen this happen to the breadliners. This happens to the cringe fringe of the far, far left. As long as they don't have a 6 or 7 figure contract, they're in the same boat, and they never speak out against it. I think that's to their great discredit.
Yeah, because could you explain like the biggest, most important aspect to me of big tech is what Professor Epstein has documented, which is the algorithmic manipulation that people don't fully appreciate is taking place. I even saw it when people came over originally to our local site. There were people that were sort of thrown off by the interface, not realizing how long they had been psychologically and emotionally and neurologically manipulated by traditional social media. They said, hey, something's missing. The text seems slow. It's like, no, what you're not getting anymore is the bombardment of manipulate. Look at this story, go to this story, highlight this, but downplay this, memory hole that, disappear this other thing. And that's particularly pernicious. And what Epstein has documented for elections, for other purposes, by itself, it can determine elections. Just what Google decides what you see in your feed when you type something in, or if you go to YouTube. I mean, I saw it big, really about a year ago, where there was just if I went to my YouTube page, total shift in what was being promoted. Before there was at least halfway decent, honest algorithm, stuff that I would actually be interested in. Now I get bombarded with CNN and MSNBC and institutional news and legal. I had to try to block legal's nonsense because of the gibberish that guy was saying. So could you explain from a content creator perspective how this manipulation is taking place such that people no longer often see your content, even subscribers don't see your content, whereas they see content that's the institutionally supported content?
Yeah, and this is a secret origin story about what YouTube is currently doing with regards to that. It's called priority creators. Initially, when this was implemented, which I believe was even before the 2016 election, the goal by YouTube was to defeat flagging raids, because back in the good old days that most people watching this don't remember, back in the 2000s, one of the most fun things that people could do is get together with their friends on a 4chan thread or on a mass Skype call or something, and they could flag videos, and as long as they hit the video hard enough, it'd get taken down by YouTube without sight unseen. You could take down entire channels through this methodology. I've seen it happen. It doesn't happen anymore because what they did is they said, well, Jimmy Kimmel has a channel. We know Jimmy Kimmel's not actually going to upload pornographic content. We know he's not actually uploading snuff or something. So we're going to greenlight his channel and give him priority status. So no matter how many flags you have, even if the algorithm looks at the tags and says, well, the tag's inappropriate, it's not going to get set to 18+. That was the initial goal. What YouTube did is take those priority channels, and it's a massively expanded list of them, by the way, now, trust me, including regional news channels in some cases. Now, I've seen this. And they said, well, if they're priority enough not to get kicked off, they're priority enough to be algorithmically favored. And so now if you look up a news item, like let's say you look up, there was a tidal wave yesterday, you look it up. Even if I make a video about it and 100,000 people have seen it, if MSNBC uploads one, even if only 5 people care, their video will be before mine. And it structures it that way. Related videos, theirs will be in related, mine won't, yours won't. And so they've extended the initial priority creator situation and warped it completely, and they've repurposed it. And so that's really what YouTube is doing today. And I think some of the other mainline tech sites basically do the same. I think Facebook algorithmically manipulates everything now too. So,
no doubt. I mean, as an example, I was just trying to look up some stuff on a recent Hush Hush episode I did on the Son of Sam murders, And I had years ago come across that the Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota has a weird connection to the Sons of Sam murders because, well, it's just weird, period. But that's a weird Air Force base because all the unusual UFO related events that have taken place there. And I type in Minot Air Force Base, figuring I'll get a good amount of this stuff. I don't get any of the UFO stories. I don't get any of the Son of Sam stories. I don't get any of it, even though it's the most popular subject matter involved. Instead, I get generic promotional materials for the Air Force and for the Air Force Base. So then I start doing more sophisticated searches, and it still keeps bringing that stuff up to me. So it's like the degree of algorithmic manipulation has reached a whole new level, so that you don't. It's like you're being gaslit in real time. You're looking for a story that you're pretty sure was there, but by golly, YouTube is telling you, no, that story doesn't exist.
I put in some titles for my videos on certain subjects, verbatim the title, and the video doesn't come up in the search result unless I put the title in quotes. And I
did a Substack article actually on that exact topic. The same thing happened to me. It also happens, basically it happens for older videos too. I think that they're trying to shove the older content partially aside too, to prioritize content that is more recently uploaded as well. Because this even happens for, videos that they couldn't possibly be considered edgy. One of them was there's a song called All in My Mind by a band called Play. It's an old, obscure 80s band. But if you put that in verbatim, they're like the 5th or 6th result. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The only thing I can think of is the video was uploaded like 8-9 years ago.
Well, I'm just reading. Michael Johansson says, Viva Barnes admitted you search for legal vids. That's why he keeps popping up. I've watched the legal vids. Sometimes I watch them to get some information, and then sometimes I watch them to know what the other side is saying, because it is very important to know what your ideological, political, whatever adversaries are thinking, even if you strongly disagree with it. And incidentally, on that subject, Styx, this might be a good segue. You were good in your predictions in 2016. I think your insight, from my humble opinion, has been pretty astute, pretty on point. Someone had asked earlier, what are your predictions for 2022 midterms? And what do you think going forward is going to happen, politically speaking, in the United States?
Yeah, it's hard to tell right now because the Republicans may be about to roll over on the infrastructure bill. If they hold their ground and generally things go on as they are going on, I don't see good things for the Democrats in the midterms. I think they lose the House and Senate. If the Republicans roll over, then they have maybe a little bit of an internal conflict and they won't be able to focus externally as much. Beyond that, I don't think Biden will be the 2024 candidate for the Democrats. By then he's either had an aneurysm and dropped, resigned. He's been forced at Kamala, pushed him down the stairs. He's been 25th or something due to his obvious cognitive problems. Kamala's, I don't think, likely to be either. I don't even think that she necessarily has the aspirations. Remember, she got 1% in the primaries. It'd be basically beating a dead horse to even have her on stage. And if Trump decides to run again, he'd macerate her. We might see a dark horse Dem candidate in 2024, but it's difficult to think about who that would be because I can't think of anyone qualified.
Is Tulsi Gabbard? Is Tulsi Gabbard still considered Democrat, or is she now operating under another label?
She's a Democrat, but she'd be politically doomed because she'd be an anti-gun blue dog, and there's no way she could possibly swing that. Yeah, the cult of personality around Tulsi never made sense. I remember when her fans were trying to credit her with destroying Kamala Harris, even though she had already lagged off 4 or 5 points of approval by the time of the debate in which she hammered her.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is Gabbard is hated by the establishment, so there's no chance that the media will not. A Republican, anti-establishment Republican can win. An anti-establishment Democrat, I don't think, can win the Democratic Party nomination.
Yeah,
Bernie Sanders was in the best position to do that, and he, folded his tent and went home. So, I think that it's an open. They have a problem on the Democratic side but this is across the world really. They constantly look for how to get around a populist challenger by handpicking a particular candidate or setting the conditions in a certain way. Seeing that, Macron was a created candidate out of nowhere in France in order to prevent Le Pen from winning. To a certain degree, Trudeau was kind of like that in Canada. They look at the Obama model. Who can we get that is telegenic, that is sort of generic and unclear about things? The problem is, one, there's not that many of them that are actually charismatic like Obama was. Macron has proven that. He's become, he has almost no chance of winning, but they're going to replace him probably with someone else to help beat Le Pen. How much do you follow European politics at
all? To some extent, when I can. One thing, actually, I wanted to bring up one thing, though, that I thought of while you were talking there. Do you think, I'll ask you this as a question, do you think Joe Kennedy makes a comeback potentially if the left completely rips apart the Democratic Party? Because, of course, he got ousted in his district by a leftist.
Yes.
Because he would be reasonably charismatic and also reasonably young.
Yes. I think the Kennedy name still carries some magical weight. And they have a history of being strategically savvy, at least for the most part. I mean, you could argue about Ted, but everybody else was. But Ted was very good at playing the inside game. He just wasn't as good at playing the outside game like his brothers were. So I think that that's still. But the wokester kind of French Revolution mindset that has embraced the left. I think that's part one of the problems. Part two of the problem is the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton political machine eviscerated any potential competition. So that's why they're almost a cycle or two away. I mean, Obama came out of nowhere, but not really out of nowhere if you knew Obama, but for the most part out of nowhere. I think it'll be tough and tricky for them to find somebody that match. But you sort of see the same thing on the Republican side where people are saying, what if Trump doesn't run? And my argument is I get DeSantis, but nobody measures up to Trump. Nobody's as charismatic as Trump. Nobody has the connection of Trump. The reason why Trump won is because our entire political class are a bunch of incompetent rubes who aren't even good at being politicians. And I think that's it. But you're seeing all the stories leak about Kamala now. So there's an internal war going on at the White House. You got the derelict dementia candidate waiting for nappy time, and then you got Kamala. Well, there's some phrases I'll use, but I can't use, so I'll stay away from them. But everybody knows how Kamala got to where she was. She took Pancho Villa's statement and reversed it. Pancho Villa said he'd rather die on his feet than live on his knees. And Kamala found the opposite to be true. But in general, what sources do you use for trying to look at American politics, understanding what's going on in society and culture? How to stay out of the mainstream media and stay access to the independent sort of more honest information?
Yeah, well, the first thing I use is RCP because that's just sort of a standard go-to because it's just an aggregator and doesn't really have its own axe to grind. It mainly collates legacy media material.
For people that don't know, that's Real Clear Politics. Yeah,
Real Clear Politics. And they also have polling, and they aggregate lamestream content mostly, but, at least it's there even for the point of rebuttal. And the other one is 4chan's Politically Incorrect page.
Oh, really?
Because when you have that many people interested in politics and news, generally speaking, collated in one place, you can get potentially local or regional events an hour or so before CNN has a van on the scene. It's faster than the legacy media anyway, as long as you're there at reasonable hours, and can be quite interesting.
It's funny.
Do you follow all the QAnon stuff?
No, I'm not a follower of the QAnon bullshit.
There was some activity in the chat, but we don't need to get into that. The funny thing is, it sticks. Reddit. This is what Reddit used to be before Reddit got taken over by censorship of mainstream news. Like Reddit, you used to be able to find the news before it got to CNN. Then there was its evil brother, another website that opened up where you could get the news before it hit CNN, but Reddit destroyed itself with its censorship, and I don't know what algorithmic tweaking it did so that the only thing
they banned everyone. It's sort of like when Tumblr banned pornographic content. It's like, well, what else is there? Reddit went red and banned its most popular communities, and they had to go somewhere.
Now, I had a question for you because people watch Tim Pool. Tim Pool is arguably hyperbolic in his predictions for what the future holds for the United States. People don't like it. People agree with it. Whatever. What's your prediction? Where do you see the U.S. going on these, these is it flashpot issues like CRT, social cohesion, electric boogaloo? Like, what do you see in store for the United States? And is your long-term plan to stay in Europe?
Okay, I actually think the U.S. will be fine in the short and intermediate term. I mean, long term, every nation eventually has problems or falls or there's a civil war or something like that. But in my particular lifetime, I think the United States will continue to rise. I think China, which is the dipole, is a paper dragon. I think our biggest threat is globalism more than any other specific nation. As far as where I'm located at any time, I basically can go wherever I want. I like freedom of movement a lot. So,
now, any particular favorite sources of material in the sense of authors, films, TV shows, etc.?
Oh, of course. I don't watch TV because I value my neurons. The few neurons, I figure there's not enough in there, and they're declining over time. So, got to preserve the ones that are there. As far as movies, if anyone here has not seen Brotherhood of the Wolf, that is my favorite movie. And Polanski's Ninth Gate is a close second. There's also Black Moon by Louis Malle and 1,000 other movies. There was one called Man Bites Dog, but it's extremely gruesome and messed up. And so I think most people wouldn't like it.
Who's in Man Bites Dog? Who is in that? Because I know I've seen it. I just can't.
It was a French film documenting faux documentary of a psychopath. I can't remember the actor's name.
Absolutely remember that. That was the guy. It was throwing a body into a big pit in the back.
There were parts of that movie were absolutely insane. As far as books, my favorite book is by James Blaylock. Actually, it's called The Elfin Ship, and it's unfortunately no longer in print, but you can get secondhand copies off the internet very easily. Amazing.
And so movies, books, and where do you go to get your information? You got 4chan. What I mean, I suspect you surf MSM just so you know what is being said out there.
Yes, I follow most of the major MSM channels on YouTube for the purposes of downvoting every upload they make and shitposting in the comments. Just to be clear, I think others should do that too, because you could ratio literally every video that they make, and then that would help red pill people. All too often, people are in an echo chamber. Like people, and this happens with leftists too. Like they don't cross train at all. And not only are they in an ideological echo chamber that just reinforces their preconceived bizarre notions, then they don't even get to lash out at their enemies. I always thought it was funny. I was trolling when I was in elementary school back in the days of Alamac and stuff. I wasn't even supposed to be on the internet. So,
so I've been following you on Twitter for a while as well. I think at one point I took issue with one tweet in particular. I forget what it was. Now, but do you ever wake up in the morning and regret a tweet you put out the day before? And if so, do you have one in mind for the crowd?
No, I don't regret any of the tweets that I've made. I always find them funny. Basically, the only purpose for Twitter at this point is to bother other people. Let's not pretend that it's a legitimate site for literally any other purpose. So as long as it pisses people off.
Now, in terms of, does BitChute is the one you like the most so far in terms of alternatives to YouTube?
I wouldn't say that. I like them all equally because they are alternatives, but I would say they're beyond alternatives at this point. And here's the reason why I went from BitChute exclusives to new tech exclusives in general. I realized I didn't want to play favorites. What I wanted to do is see how each of these sites innovates over time and let them compete with their own market share. I like BitChute a lot. I like Odyssey. I like Rumble. And also Minds has video capabilities as well. Then there's Dailymotion. Dailymotion's not new tech. It's older than YouTube, but it's still technically a viable platform and considerably less censored.
We're going to run out of time, and I know you have a hard leave in a few minutes. What can people expect from you going forward? Before we get there, your creative process, your research process, what you do on a daily basis for anybody who is curious and doesn't know, how do you work and what's your method?
For my videos?
Yes.
Yeah, I go through 4chan, I go through RCP, I also go through the people I subscribe to on YouTube, and I find things that I'm personally interested in. I tend, unless it's a big story, I tend not to actually cover things that I'm not interested in, because of course it's going to be a lower energy video. So I go to things that I'm interested in, and then I read up about them, preferably from multiple sources, especially if it's politically related. I'll want the ideas of the right, the left, other groups of people, and then I pop that info into my notepad file just so that I have my tags on hand, and then I, press record.
A critical question: does Amsterdam still have the best pot in the world?
I don't smoke pot. I haven't used. I think the last time I smoked pot was 2011 or 2012.
So
it's funny. I'm the only sober man in Amsterdam.
And now another question, which everyone's asking for: how do you manage your other personality of Razor Fist without getting caught?
Exactly. See, you have to have me back on, but you have to have Razor Fist at the same time, so we can prove once and for all we're not the same person. Here's how I can prove it. He can ride a motorcycle. I would fall down. And also, he can't cook a proper pizza because he thinks that pineapple doesn't go on pizzas. So I have the better pizzas, and he has more balance. That's basically the long and short of it.
Well, it is amazing because you have a similar delivery. Pace is a little different, but your thought process and your critical thinking is something that's very interesting. Like you never went back to university after U of M. I mean, are you self-taught in everything? Do you read do you read philosophy, logic, things like this, or have you always had this sort of analytic, critical way of thinking about things?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I read every day because I also edit every day. But most of that is on spiritual subjects. As far as politics, it's just mostly my own introspection.
All right. Let's see if we get some. We got a few minutes. Anyone in the chat get a question that we didn't get to? I know I took a couple of screenshots that I'm going to get to real quick. Styx, this is from Robert Richardson. Are we going to see more stuff with you and Liz? Another amazing podcast.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff with us together, including a video from today on her channel. So you can check her channel out, actually. I think we've done probably about a dozen videos together now.
And biggest and favorite story of 2020 that you've covered?
As far as politics?
Yes, as far as politics.
Well, the initial COVID release is actually because at the time I was telling people to stock up on food and stuff because there would be shortages, and then I got hundreds of messages thanking me. So I felt good about that, to do something positive.
Are things close to how close are they to normal now in Amsterdam since all the
there's completely normal, with the exception of I think you have to have masks on like the train. I think that's the only difference.
And have you traveled back to the States recently under the new restrictions or under what's going on?
In February. And the one benefit is that so many fewer people are in the airlines that basically not only do you have a seat empty next to you, you have the whole cabin. Because I was actually in premium for the first time, and it was almost godly. And there was one other person in the cabin, and by the way, Delta does not care about the mask mandate. If you are actually already seated, they're not going to raise a fuss. They don't care if you wear the mask, just to be clear.
It's fascinating. It all depends on which airline you're on and which flight you're on. And they tend to be much more flexible on international flights than domestic flights, because I've flown on some flights that are international planes that are flying international, though I was only going domestic. Totally different, much more relaxed attitude. Then it's weird. It's like if you're flying a short distance flight, those are the people that are the most over the top. It's counterintuitive, but it's insane.
I'll turn this plane around.
Yeah. Now, how insane was it during the lockdowns there?
Not as insane as for reference, what people from the United States told me it was like there. Although I did see one dude with a homemade, I don't know exactly what it was. He had this plastic funnel over his mouth and a tube going into a cardboard box that he had on his chest. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think that's how a hazmat suit works. But I mean, even at peak, at maximum, maybe a third of people outside had masks on. And even then is I didn't wear mine except when I had to, and nobody really cared.
All right. Now, Styx, I don't want to keep you past because I know you said it was a hard hour 5. So everybody, it's a shorter stream than normal today, but it's beautiful. And we're going to leave some subject matter for the next time when something comes up. Styx, maybe we can do this again. Stick around.
Absolutely.
Stick around after I end this. We'll say our proper goodbyes, but everyone in the chat, thank you very much. I'm searching through and I don't think we missed any questions that were not there, but thank you very much.
One last clank for people.
And I'm sorry. Where
and I'll be over at a live chat at vivabarneslaw.locals.com right after the show.
And Styx, let us know everywhere where we can find you and under what names if we can do it, and I'll pin that to the comment in this.
Yeah, just look up Styxhexenhammer666, and probably Google still has all of the results up.
All right,
Too
excellent.
many.
Stick 2 seconds, everyone. Thanks a lot. Have a good